All right, I'm here joined by Hall of Fame announcer Jim Lampley. Thank you so much for your time. I really truly appreciate it.
My privilege, Joel.
This is the second time I'm interviewing you. I know you don't remember the first time, but I just want to say it was an honor then and it's still an honor now. This is the first time we do it in person, so I'm very excited for this. I'm very much looking forward to the interview.
Excited to be with you. I
Yeah.
don't remember yesterday's interviews, so please don't feel any sensitivity about whatever it is you think I have forgotten. But,
No, no, no. We're good. We're
all
good.
right, good. Thank you.
So you just recently wrote a book, It Happened, named after your famous call, which we'll get to. But what made you write a book this stage of your life?
Well, I've always had a sense from a long time ago that my life was unusual, beginning with the fact that my father died when I was 5 years old. My mother had to um, engage in a lot of courageous and self sustaining acts to keep our lives together. And she went out of her way from early on to immerse me in sports events. And in fact, the very first event that she ever insisted that I watch and learn something from was when I was 6 years old, and she took me down a hallway at a neighbor's house and put me in front of a small television set on a TV dinner tray and said, "Sit right here. You're going to watch Sugar Ray Robinson versus Bobo Olson for the middleweight championship on Gillette Friday Night Fights. You're going to do this because if your father was still alive, he had died the year before. This is what you would be doing with him. And by the way, pay special attention to Sugar Ray Robinson. He's my favorite fighter because he dances when he fights." Now, I was not old enough at that moment to understand the full import of a woman, a now 36-year-old double widow from an all Irish family in Memphis, Tennessee, who was openly willing to say that her favorite fighter was a black man
Mm.
who had a particular style in the ring. Ultimately, I would learn that that was unusual, and I would learn a lot of other things from her about race, ethnicity, etc., that helped me to become a successful sports reporter. But the bottom line is, from early on, not only have I known that my life was a somewhat unusual story, but I
Mhm.
also was the product of my mother and my father's mother, my paternal grandmother, who competed for my attention by telling me stories. They were both inveterate,
Mm.
nonstop storytellers. I would spend all summer in Hendersonville, North Carolina, in my grandmother's kitchen, watching her cook pound cakes for everybody in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Then I would go home to Miami for 9 months of the school year in Miami, and I would listen to my mother tell her stories, and I would also watch the Gillette Friday Night Fights.
And their storytelling somewhat affected you, and you now to some
Well,
degree that
there's no question. I
yeah.
mean, my wife, in the wake of the publication of the book, my wife has said to me, "How is it that you go down one avenue, make a right turn, go back to another neighborhood, somehow find some commonality in the story, and then come back out on the other side? What gives that to you?" I said, "My mother and my grandmother. That was the way they both told stories. So
Uh,
it's natural for me to think in narrative terms that way." But yeah, I had an unusual life. I went through life as a storyteller, telling stories on
mhm.
sports television eventually. I went through all of that. I reached a point at which I said, okay, this is over with. I went to the place where I'd gone to University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, taught for 5 semesters, got tired of that. What's next?
Uh,
Write a book. And that's how I came to the prospect of writing my autobiography.
Okay, all right. Well, you had mentioned your mother was double widowed, and I kind of want to touch on that if that's okay. Man, uh, that your mom is a strong woman to have survived that and raised, you know, was it two young boys, you and your brother? And did she ever all the stories she told you? She ever told you the stories about? losing her first husband, excuse me, and then
Well, I knew the
losing the
stories,
second one, and
I knew
what?
from my family what all of the narrative terms of that were.
Hmm.
And my mother had her first open heart surgery in 1953. She was in the hospital at New York Hospital in 1953, all the way up here from Hendersonville, North Carolina, because at that time you couldn't get open heart surgery in Hendersonville, North Carolina. You had to come to New York. So she was here for her first open heart surgery in 1953. The hospital allowed my father to be checked into the room with her before her surgery so that he could help comfort her in preparation. And they gave him a physical and came into the room the night before my mother's surgery and said, "We have a very serious discussion to have because we're not sure what you want to do. But you, Jim Lampley, have cancer. And the cancer that you have is pernicious enough and advanced enough that your life is in doubt. And the surgery that she's about to have is new enough and unexplored enough that her life is in doubt. So, what do you want to do?" And they decided to go forward with her surgery. And she survived it. Many years later, died after her fourth open heart surgery. My
Wow.
father died of cancer in 1954. So by the time my mother was 35 years old, she had survived her first open heart surgery. She had lost two husbands. Her first husband, who was a bomber squadron wingmate to my father in the Air Force in World War II, died when the transport plane bringing him back from Saipan
Hmm.
crashed into a mountain in western North Carolina, one county over from where my father lived. And my
Mm.
father had come back earlier from Saipan because he was of a lower rank.
Mm.
My mother's first husband, Frederick, he was a full bird colonel, a lieutenant or a colonel, full colonel at that time, and that he had to stay longer on Saipan for the cleanup. The legend in my family is that my father walked into his mother's kitchen around the time of Christmas 1945, and my grandmother said, "Jim, there's a radio report of a transport plane crashing in Brevard, and everybody is lost." And my father supposedly said at that moment, "That's Fred Trickey's plane." The truth is, he couldn't possibly have known exactly on what transport plane his buddy was coming back. That's my grandmother making up a detail to make the story even better.
Mm.
So the story my grandmother told was that my father knew it was Fred Trickey's plane. What we
Okay.
do know is true is that a few days later, he took a uniform and some medals of his own to Tampa, to McDill Field in Tampa, so that my mother would have something to bury.
Did
And
he did your father at the time know your mother?
they were good friends
Okay.
because they had both been on um, the air base at McDill Field in Tampa and Pratt, Kansas, where the training for B-29s took place. They knew each other well.
Okay.
So my father took a uniform, some medals to Tampa for my mother to bury. They began to see each other, got married in 1948. I was born in 1949. My
Okay.
mother had her first open heart surgery in 1953. Father died in 1954. So by the time my mother's 35, she has seen two husbands die. She has one son from each of the two husbands. She has not previously worked for a living at that point.
Okay.
And now she has to figure out what to do. She wound up leaving Hendersonville, North Carolina, going to Miami to learn how to sell life insurance. I spent all of my adolescence and teenage years in Miami, and that's where I saw my first boxing match.
Yeah. Muhammad Ali versus Sonny Liston.
At that moment, it was Cassius Clay versus Sonny
Yes,
Liston.
Cassius Clay.
February
Excuse me.
25, 1964, Miami Beach Convention Center. I saved lawn mowing and car washing money for months. My mother took me over to Miami Beach and dropped me off to go into the arena. I watched Cassius Clay's upset of Sonny Liston. I was rooting for him. I was a passionate Cassius Clay fan. 2 days later, he stood on a street corner in Miami and announced that he was a follower of the Nation of Islam and his new name was Muhammad Ali. And I was dumbfounded, thrown for a colossal loop.
I
Mom, what is Islam? So that began a new education.
When when I mentioned I spoke with Don Majesty. I interviewed him not long ago, and I mentioned him. I'm like, what was it like living in that moment? Because now revisionist history, I can look at it a different way. And the way he described it was he it would be like if Jackie Robinson announced he was a communist or a homosexual. It was just as equally as jarring.
Jarring.
What was your personal reaction when that happened?
I was shocked. I was discomfited. I still wanted to call him Cassius Clay. I remember I continued to call him Cassius Clay all through the build-up to Lewiston, Maine, and his knockout of Liston
Mm-hmm.
in the second fight. Eventually, he taught me a lesson, and the lesson that he taught me is that his identity was his own.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I loved him, even though I wanted to feel as though I owned him, the fact of the matter is that it was his right to be seen for who he was. And even if I didn't understand Islam, and I thought that, because I was a Christian, that was something jarring and very different from me,
Mm-hmm.
I was making a lot of Jewish friends in Miami. So I was gradually broadening my outlook with regard to all of these things. And eventually, again, he taught me a lesson. He taught me that man's identity is his own, his religion is his own. If he wanted to be called Muhammad Ali, I called him Muhammad Ali. It probably took me a year to get over that hump. He also taught me, by the way, my position on the Vietnam War. I was child of a military hero. My brother was a child of a military hero. It was very jarring to me to think that someone would want to decline induction into the armed forces. But the more I thought about that, and the more I thought about the things that he said, the more I understood him, and I was able to accommodate that as well. And of course, part of it was I was in love. I was in love with the way he fought. I was in love with the poetry. I was in love with the anti-racism campaign. My mother was an ardent anti-racist. She always taught me from the very beginning, those are the things that you will never subscribe to. And that was a tremendous stimulus to my career.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I want to fast forward into your career. The first fight you ever announced was a Mike Tyson fight.
Yep. And I was assigned to boxing by a newly incoming executive at ABC Sports who arrived with one predilection about the sports division, which was, who is Jim Lampley and how do I get rid of him? And how do I get this salary off the books? And how do I get his Olympic assignment guarantees out of my way so that I can do what I want to do here? And the method he chose for trying to alienate me and get rid of me at ABC Sports was to assign me to boxing. He thought, this is a sport where he won't fit. He's a spit and polished, preppy kid from the South, et cetera. There's no way that he's going to understand or fit into the boxing world. He had no idea that I had seen way more Gillette Friday night fights than he had seen, that I had been watching that all through my youth and in childhood. He had no idea that Muhammad Ali was my idol in life. None of those things were in his thought process when he assigned me to boxing. He also did not seem to realize that the network had signed a get acquainted, look-see contract with a 19-year-old heavyweight from upstate New York, whose name was Mike Tyson. So my very first network television boxing exposure was calling Mike Tyson versus Jesse Ferguson in Glens Falls, New York, with a brilliant expert commentator named Alex Wallow, who was actually an executive at the network, not, an announcer. And Alex was a preppy, spit and polished Greenwich kid who had begun coming to boxing gyms in New York as a little boy and continued all through his teenage years and through his 20s and upbringing and everything. So Alex and I went to Glens Falls, New York together for Tyson versus Jesse Ferguson. And you'll recall, of course, that in the fifth round, Tyson threw an uppercut that exploded Ferguson's nose. I mean, detonated it. And there was blood all over the ring. It was a spectacular, theatrical knockout. Eventually, the referee stopped the fight because there was blood all over the place. And in the post-fight interview, Alex went, forget whether he was in the ring or at ringside. I think he was in the ring. And he first question was, Mike, tell me about the uppercut. And Mike said, Cat D'Amato taught me that the purpose of the uppercut was to drive the nose bone into the opponent's brain. I was trying to drive his nose bone into his brain. And I was standing at ringside thinking, oh my gosh, look at what I've happened into here. This kid is not only going to be the number one quote machine in boxing, he's going to be the number one quote machine in sports. And within the next couple of weeks, they all came rolling out. Boxing is a hurt business. Everybody's got a plan until you hit it, et cetera, et cetera. He was amazing at that time.
What was what was it like living in the moment where he's coming up, knocking everybody out 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, four? And even when he got to the championship level where he fought Trevor Berbick, knocked him out in the second round, knocked out Michael Spinks and won, a guy who has 2 wins over Larry
I called
Holmes.
the Spinks fight, and I had watched Spinks beat up Jerry Cooney. And I thought, Spinks did what he did to Cooney. He can handle a puncher like this, et cetera, et cetera. Wrong, gone in 31 seconds. Mike was incredible at that point.
What is his legacy? Because some people like to dismiss how great he was because he doesn't have a name on his resume like a Ali, like a Frazier, like a Holyfield or Lennox Lewis. He never beat one of those guys. He has a good resume, but not great. Where would you say his legacy? What would you say is his legacy?
Well, I think you want to be realistic. He was the product of the greatest matchmaking campaign of all time. Bill Caton and Jimmy Jacobs were brilliant managers. Jimmy, in particular, had a tremendous knack for understanding which fights Mike would dominate and win easily. When he was beginning his career, and the first 17 fights were all spectacular knockouts. He was knocking guys through the air. He was knocking them out of the ring, et cetera, et cetera. Jimmy and Bill put together a videotape compendium of all of Mike's knockouts at one point. There were at least a dozen of them on the tape. And it's just 6 or 7 seconds at a time because the purpose of the tape was for local television sports directors to be able to use this to fill out their space on 11 o'clock news broadcasts. At that moment in time, we're in the local news era. And every sports director in the country had to be able to fill 3.5 or 4 minutes with sports material on the 11 o'clock news. And in many markets, Indianapolis, for instance, there wasn't enough going on to be able to easily fill that amount of time. So to get this piece of tape that showed a dozen or more knockouts in rapid fire succession, and they're all overwhelmingly theatrical, was a godsend to local sports directors, and everybody in the country at the local level at some point saw Mike Tyson before they ever saw a live Mike Tyson fight. And for a lot of them, the first live Mike Tyson fight they saw was the Jesse Ferguson fight. I was trying to drive his nose bone into his brain. So Mike was like a cartoon character. He was spectacular and almost beyond belief. And it was easy to adopt the point of view that this guy is going to destroy everybody in front of him and absolutely take over and rule the heavyweight division. If you bought into that, you were forgetting the fact that he was 5'10", that he was essentially a power puncher. He had some other skills, but he didn't have what you would call the entire package, that he did not have experience against a lot of different styles. When he went into the heavyweight tournament on HBO, the legitimate truth began to show up, and everybody forgets this. It's amazing how many people only remember the first thing they saw of Mike Tyson and forget the reality of this. You're right. He knocked Berbick down 3 times with 1 punch. But then as that tournament continued, he went the distance with James Bone Crusher Smith. He went the distance with Jose Ribalta, or at least to the last 10 seconds with Jose Ribalta. He went the distance here in Madison Square Garden with Mitch Blood Green. These were not great fighters. These were guys who were taller, longer. Some of them had a right hand they could bring over the top that was difficult for Mike to see. If you had been paying really close attention to all of that, if you were thoroughly analytical about all of that, you might have said to yourself, Buster Douglas, 6'4", 235 pounds, a real athlete, a former college basketball player, does indeed throw a right hand directly over the top where Mike can't see it. You might have said to yourself, Douglas is not a 42-1 underdog. He should perhaps be the favorite in the fight. So what happened February 10, 1990 in Tokyo, if you look back and pay attention to everything I just listed as the precursors, it's not that big a shock. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it wasn't a shock to me, all right? Because I was still the product of my background with Mike and my belief that Mike was largely unbeatable. The first time I went to Tokyo, he knocked out Tony Tubbs in 4 rounds. That was the Mike that I was accustomed to. But if I had paid a lot of attention, and I was at the Mitch Blood Green fight in Madison Square Garden, I remember just thinking, oh, okay, it was a bad night. It wasn't just a bad night. Taller, longer guys were always capable of giving Mike more difficulty. And ultimately, that showed up throughout his career.
Okay. So his dominance during his era, you don't think it's enough for him to be rated with the other all-time greats?
Is he Joe Louis?
Well, is he in that conversation is more what I'm saying. In that conversation with
I just
Ali,
saw,
Lewis, Frazier,
do you know
Foreman.
Tom Hauser?
Yeah, I don't know him personally, but I know who you're talking about.
Okay, so Tom Hauser just put out an article. I believe it's about the top 20 heavyweights of all time. It might be top 25. Tyson is number 6 or number 7. That's a pretty good ranking.
Sounds about right.
Might be number 9, something like that. But
Okay.
he's not Joe Louis. He's not.
Well, Joe Louis, I think, is probably number 1 or 2, depending on who you got, him or Ali. So if you're saying he's not Joe Louis, I don't think that's an insult.
On Hauser's list, it was 1 Ali, and this was a poll of boxing writers, all of them top boxing writers.
Okay.
It was Ali number 1. It was Louis number 2.
Yeah,
I believe Dempsey was in the top 5. Holmes was ahead of Tyson. And there were others. So,
Okay.
The bottom line is, realistically, he was really good, but there were limitations, and the limitations eventually showed up.
Okay. All right. Circling back to your career, in our last interview, you had mentioned you had a bad experience with Howard Cosell at a halftime show or something like that.
Well, I was the inheritor to the halftime highlight shtick that Howard did on Monday Night Football.
Okay.
And the halftime highlight shtick was literally a shtick. It was almost a comic book performance that he put together every Monday night to deliver the highlights from the preceding week. So eventually the network decides that Howard has aged out of that, or he decides that he's aged out of that, and they're choosing who's the next person to do the halftime highlights. And I was the next person to do the halftime highlights. And I was still very young. I was in my early 30s. I wasn't exactly a personality match with Frank Gifford and Don Meredith, and it just was. It was a little off kilter, and viewers hated me. Literally hated me because I was not Howard Cosell doing what they had come to want and expect as the halftime highlights. In fact, it was my experience doing the halftime highlights, and eventually they switched to having Gifford do it. It was that experience that prompted Dennis Swanson, the executive who later wanted to get rid of me at ABC Sports, to believe that boxing was the way to do that, because he thought, okay, I'll assign him to boxing. The audience will see him as the successor to Cosell, and the same thing will happen. They'll blackball him because he's not Cosell. That was his method and his formula in that regard.
So you never had a problem directly with Cosell?
Well, I actually worked with him. And
what was that experience like?
Well, it was unusual. But if you knew Howard, and I'm sure you didn't, if you had known Howard, you might have not have been surprised by this. Howard eventually prevailed upon the network to give him a magazine style show, a weekend, um, sort of a sports version of 60 Minutes, or something of that nature, as his showcase for his unique reporting skills. Tell it like it is. And the show was called Sports Beat. And the basic nature of Sports Beat at that point was that Howard was going to sit in the studio every weekend and interview Sonny Werblin, um, Sonny Werblin, uh, Al Davis, a couple of others. There were four, Bowie Kuhn. There were four of them who were buddies of his, drinking buddies of his at 21
Mm-hmm.
up on 52nd Street. And he would do a studio interview with one of those four guys every weekend. And then somebody had to go out and travel and do a feature report. So I was the guinea pig who had to go travel for Howard and do a feature report. And I wound up having an office right down the hall from his on the 12th floor at ABC. And that was a schizophrenic type experience because I was three doors away from him. And Howard was always theatrical and bombastic. And uh, every time I went in and sat in my office there on the 12th floor and tried to do work, do whatever I was doing, to get ready for one of the trips I was doing for him to
Mm-hmm.
go interview somebody and develop a story that he could play off of on the air. He would pop out of his office where the three secretaries were located, and he would either say, you know, the kid down the hall there is the only other on air person here who can actually complete a complex sentence.
Mm.
He's way more intelligent than all those other morons who are on the air doing Wide World of Sports or any of the other programs that we're putting on the air. So the truth is, he's the best person to be doing what he's doing for us. That was one iteration. The other version was, you know, the kid is a moron, hired, promoted, an imbecile who is pretending on the air that he can be a network sportscaster. It's embarrassing to us, and it's embarrassing to the entire network. It just depended which mood he was in on any given day, which of those things I was going to hear. And eventually, he began writing his books. The first one was called Cosell. Then there was one called Like It Is. There were three or four of those books. So once he's writing the books, then he is in his office and he keeps writing and he has the galleys in his desk. And if I was there, eventually he would send one of the secretaries down the hall. Howard needs to see you in his office right now. And I would go to the office. Jimmy, I'm going to read you something which is very important for you to know. Because if you want to continue here and succeed in this career, you have to know the things that only I can teach you. And he would pull out the galleys and read to me from whatever was going to be the next book. And my job, of course, was to say, oh, Howard, that's amazing. That's unique. You're the only person in sports who can deliver that kind of perspective.
So he was a very like arrogant person, you would say? Or?
Oh my gosh. I mean, arrogant doesn't get to 1/3 of it. You know, he was extremely arrogant, beyond arrogant. He was hyperbolically egotistical. He was incredibly insecure. He needed attention the way a theatrical 5-year-old needs attention. But it was all part of who he is. A lot of people thought it was an act. It wasn't an act, and he was catered to and massaged by a lot of different people, including Leonard Goldenson, who was the individual owner of ABC, including Roone Arledge, the chief executive of the sports division, who had discovered Howard when he was head of children's programming at NBC and had taken a limousine in to the city every Saturday morning from Scarsdale to do the oversight of the children's programming on NBC and began listening to a Little League baseball radio show that Howard was doing in Scarsdale. That's
Mm.
where Arledge first heard the voice. Little Stevie Scheffler playing center field for Ben Brunei Syracuse, and whatever. And he heard that voice, and Arledge thought to himself, I could do something with that. And Howard got a gig at ABC Radio doing sports reporting, and eventually Arledge put him on the air at ABC Sports and created the role for him on Monday Night Football that made him larger than life. So Arledge was the puppeteer, and Cosell was the puppet. And that's how he developed his unique and outsized career at ABC Sports. And eventually, I worked for him, I worked with him. It was torturous, it was humiliating, it was funny, it was unique.
Man, that's so interesting that he got a job off of a little league
Little League
announcing gig.
Baseball radio show.
That's I feel like that's a story. I don't have you ever told that story? That's amazing to hear.
I would love to tell you, Joel, that you are the first person to whom I have ever told the Little League Baseball story, but that would be fibbing.
Okay. All right.
I have let it out before.
Okay. All right. So the name of your book is called It Happened After Your Best Call. And I think it'll be a big miss if we don't discuss the recent passing of your old friend George Foreman. When you got that news, man, what was that like?
Shock. I mean, overwhelming shock. I had grown not just to like and respect him, but to love him over the years. He was an amazing person, one of a kind. And he offered me eventually, once we got comfortable with each other, that wasn't the way it was at first, but eventually he offered me life advice that was so valuable and so meaningful to me. He offered me business advice that was valuable and meaningful to me. He was, I said this to you earlier before we came in here to the studio. George was a genius. A lot of people don't realize or understand that. And when I say to people, George was a genius, and they say, what's your evidence for that? The first thing I always say is, look at the bank account. You think somebody else created that? That was George. He was the one who chose all of the products that he advertised. But, I was not aware that he was ill in any way. I had some communication with his family members, the little colony down in Texas over the years, but not recently enough that I would have known that anything was going on. And I woke up one day to the news that George was dead. Shocking, disturbing, painful, sad, and I'm still capable of tearing up over it because I certainly wasn't ready for that. And I think that's true of most of us outside of the immediate family.
Do you keep in contact with Larry Merchant?
From time to time, I talk to Larry, who is 93, 94 years old, living in his own apartment on Ocean Boulevard in Santa Monica, looking at the Pacific Ocean, watching fights, commenting to himself on what he sees in the fights.
Okay.
Still thoughtful, still overwhelmingly intelligent, still the great Larry Merchant.
Man, I would love to have a conversation with him. I don't know. I doubt he travels much, but if he's ever in New York, I definitely would love to have him in studio.
I don't think he's going to be coming to New York anymore. Although, of course, Larry grew up in Brooklyn. He was a 135-pound halfback at Lafayette High School in Brooklyn. And he told his father, he said, Dad, I want to go play college football. And his father said, well, Brooklyn College has a football team. It's right down the street. Larry said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I want to go to Oklahoma and play for Bud Wilkinson. Now, this is the late 1940s.
Okay.
Early 1950s, when Oklahoma is becoming the number one thing in college football. And Larry actually goes to Oklahoma, entered undergraduate school at Oklahoma, walked on for the football team, and ultimately he describes brilliantly the day when Bud Wilkinson called him into his office and gave him a jersey and said, "I'm going to put you on that team," because because of what he had meant to everybody in practice, because of what he brought to the the team in terms of determination and fight. And Larry was an unusual personality. He taught me so much and
Hmm.
taught me a lot about boxing, taught me a lot about life. Um, I loved him, and I loved Max Kellerman in exactly the same way. So it was wonderful and amazing over the years to work at HBO Sports with those guys and the roles that they were in. And then, of course, you get to the expert commentators besides George. Emanuel Stewart is the closest male friend I've ever had in adult life. Roy Jones is still a brother to this day. Max Kellerman is yet another brother. This was a wonderful, tight knit group, a bonded brotherhood of people at HBO, and I was overwhelmingly, indescribibly fortunate to be able to work in that culture.
Hmm. That you beat me to it. I was leading into. You still keep in contact with Max Kellerman? After he left ESPN, he just disappeared. He's not on social media. I don't know where he's been. You still keep in contact with him? How is he doing?
You just described perfectly what, for reasons I don't know, has happened with Max Kellerman. There are times when I try to reach Max. Um, I think I had brief contact with him about a personal situation involving Roy a few months ago. But at the moments when I reached out to Max to try to talk to him about future work or something to do with his career, I can't reach him. So um, I regret that. It's disturbing, but that's up to Max. He's, like I say, a brother, and I support whatever he wants to do. I do not know why Max has gone under the radar.
Okay. And and touching back on Emmanuel Stewart, who you claimed as your closest adult friend that you've had in your
Ever.
life, oh, ever. Uh, uh, how did you guys grow so close? Obviously you guys work together, but there's a process as to how you guys become best friends.
Just a natural affinity. And, you would have to ask Emmanuel what motivated him to behave toward me the way he did. But, I had watched Tommy Hearns, and I had paid attention to Emmanuel's career and what he was doing in Detroit long before I ever met him. I was a
Hmm.
fan of Emmanuel Stewart, the trainer. And then once I'm doing boxing matches for ABC in the summer, I think of 1987, I eventually am going to be sent to Detroit to cover Tommy Hearns versus Dennis Andries,
Hmm.
and Hearns is trying to win the light heavyweight championship. And I have not covered Hearns before that moment. And um, I arrived in Detroit expecting the normal routine, which is I go to baggage claim, I get my bag. There's a driver there who's going to drive me to the hotel. And I arrive in baggage claim and I look for the driver with a sign, and he's not there. But Emmanuel's there. And
Mm.
Emmanuel comes over to me and says, "Hey, Jimbo, I'm Emmanuel Stewart, da da da." And he called me Jimbo, which was my childhood nickname. I have no idea how in the world he divined that. It was though he just somehow realized that was the thing to call me.
Hmm.
And I, I asked him. I said, "Where's my driver?" He said, "I sent your driver away. I'm going to take you to the hotel." I
Mm.
I wanted us to start to get to know each other right now here on Thursday night before we have fighter meetings tomorrow and everything. So let's take a ride in the car, show you a little bit of downtown Detroit. Let's get comfortable with each other. And thus began my closest and most loving adult friendship. It was just an amazing man. I mean, beyond everything he did as a boxing trainer, the things he survived in life, leaving his tiny West Virginia town when he weighed less than 120 pounds to come to Detroit, get a job in the automobile factories, to start making his way up, get away from a fractious household where he had seen a lot of conflict, to start Kronk Jim on his own and do everything he did for hundreds, maybe thousands of young people in Detroit, not just the Tommy Hearnses and all of the other great fighters that he trained, but people who are anonymous that we'll never know whose lives were changed by this man. He was um, beyond a saint. He was a civic leader and an emotional leader and a spiritual leader, bigger than anybody I ever met. And every time we were doing fights together, we would dine together on Friday night. We would do our walks to the fighter meetings and our walks to the arena together, et cetera. We just loved being with each other. His last public appearance was at my wedding to Deborah Schuss in 2012. And he came to our house in Del Mar, California that night. Michael Buffer conducted the wedding.
Oh, wow.
It was a boxing occasion in a lot of different ways. And toward the end of the evening, Emanuel's girlfriend came to Deborah and said, Emanuel is having some stomach pains, and we are sorry that we're going to have to leave early, but I've got to take him to get looked at and get some help. And about a month later, he died. We never saw him again. He was into oncology within a few days after the wedding. So my last directly related Emanuel Stewart experience was that I was given the right to read a eulogy for him on behalf of HBO in the huge African American or African Methodist Episcopal Church in Detroit, with 5,000 people there, with 5 heavyweight champions in the front row, including Mike, including Evander, including both Klitschko's, et cetera. It was a phenomenal occasion. Aretha Franklin sang. I'll never forget it as long as I live, and I'll never forget him and how much I loved him.
Oh, that's great.
He was great.
Yeah,
he was a great man.
That's good to hear. I want to get into some fights that you covered. And
now that I'm weeping, yeah.
Listen, I'm holding back tears here now. It's okay. It's okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a 1-to-1. Pretty much all you have to do is say Emanuel, and it's hard for me. It really is.
Well, you know what? Let's touch on the topic. You're someone who's not afraid to show emotion, not on camera, off camera. You've always cried and never felt shame or embarrassed or anything. Where does that come from, and why are you so confident that it's not a problem? You know,
my mother and my grandmother.
Okay,
both of them would say to me, "You want to cry? Cry. It's nobody else's business. It is your way of getting out of you what's hurting you inside, and we don't want you to hurt inside. So if you feel like crying, whatever the occasion, wherever you are, cry." Don't worry about being embarrassed. What it really shows is your strength. So I bought that. I bought into it. I bought into the idea that if a man can cry in public and not be embarrassed or ashamed, then what he's really showing is strength. Did I always feel comfortable with it? Were there moments, particularly when I choked up and cried on the air, when I sort of wished I hadn't? Yeah, but it's not something I can control. It's who I am.
Okay. All right. All right.
You said Emanuel Stewart. That was that.
Well, it wasn't my intention, you know.
No, I know. I understand that,
yeah.
And I don't. I'm not bothered by it. Okay.
Yeah.
It's me.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to get into some fights you covered, and I want to start off with the 4th and final fight with Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez. That was a fight going into it where everybody was picking Pacquiao, including myself. I'm not going to leave myself out of it. And it just seemed like Marquez was a little bit stronger and had learned that he had to knock this guy out if he wanted to win. He wasn't.
Joel, what is always the antidote to the great puncher? The great great counterpuncher.
Mm.
Okay. So Manny Pacquiao, you have a great attacker, a really skilled, brilliant attacker with a long career of attacking success.
Yes.
Marquez, arguably the best counterpuncher in the world, and a counterpuncher with more power than most people would have given him credit for.
He would always drop guys. He wasn't always knocking guys out, but for sure he had power.
He had power and he had fabulous counterpunching instincts and skills.
And accuracy.
And that night, my wife, Deborah, was one of quite a number of people in the ring whose initial thought was that Manny was dead. You know, the way he went down, the stillness of it, the immediacy of it. You know, I don't remember whether his eyes rolled back in his head, but maybe they did. And Deborah was in the arena, and she thought he's dead. And other people said the same thing afterward. Now, obviously, that didn't turn out to be the case. But again, it was one of those cases where the matchup ultimately favored the great counterpuncher, because that's who counterpunchers are. They feed off of the other guy committing. And when Manny committed, he committed. You know, he was way out there, whether it was a right hand or a left. He was going to throw as hard as he possibly could. And that's what Marquez took advantage of. And it was, you know, it was an immediate reflex. Marquez was not just a counterpuncher. He was an amazingly skilled counterpuncher. So the instant Manny's big punch starts to go, Marquez is countering with the big punch, straight up the middle, right-hand shot.
Do you remember your feelings at that moment? Because I remember mine, and it was two things. One, it was, whoa, what a big upset. And the second immediate emotion was, there goes the Mayweather fight. Did you have that feeling?
Well, I'll be honest. I might have thought intellectually or tactically, yeah, there goes the Mayweather fight. But I had no emotional investment in the notion that Manny was going to fight Floyd Mayweather, because I already knew the outcome of that fight.
You knew Mayweather would always win that fight.
100%. There was no way in the world that Manny Pacquiao, with his energetic commitment to going forward and attacking, was going to beat Floyd Mayweather. Again, the great counterpuncher, the great boxer. Floyd's skills and Manny's skills simply matched up in such a way that there was only one outcome possible. And I knew that for a long time.
So even when they were there at their best, which was like 09, 010, when, you know, when.
Still would have picked Mayweather.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Still would have picked Floyd. And I mean, look, I'm not sitting here and telling you that I pick every fight right. That's not the case.
I got you.
I got you. I'm quite capable of missing. But Floyd versus Mayweather, I knew that outcome for a long, long time.
Okay. Talk to me about Gotti. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Floyd versus Pacquiao, excuse me. Yes. Yeah. Talk to you about Gatti Ward?
Yeah, Gotti Ward. That was a trilogy where these guys, especially the first fight, was just a brutal war. Talk to me about covering that fight and being ringside and having fighter meetings with these warriors and getting all of it. What was that like?
Well, I learned a lot, and I have often delineated this over the years, that what you learn in situations like that, where two pure brawlers are going to go in against each other, and they are going to brawl on their own terms, and it's going to be life and death, because they don't know any other way to fight. And, excuse me, when that happens, you're aware that you're going to see blood, you're going to see mayhem, you're going to see vicious face-to-face destruction of a kind that you might not see from any other fighters who are alive at that time. They were the two premier total brawlers in the sport at the moments when they fought. And you learn that you're going to see 12 rounds of life and death struggle and vicious back and forth that ultimately computes to love. They were falling in love with each other the whole time, because the respect that they develop, the appreciation that they develop for the other man's ability to take their stuff and come back with his own stuff, that's their core. That's where they begin from. and then they see it in another person, in another man, they can only be moved to awe and breathtaking respect for each other in that situation. And they wind up in a form of love. Now, what did you see after the third Gaddy Ward fight? They went to the hospital together in the same med truck because neither would get into a truck of his own. I'm not going without that guy. That's how much in love they were. Mickey gave the eulogy at Arturo's funeral. Arturo spoke at Mickey's wedding. This shows up over and over in their lives after the first fight. So I had the privilege of calling those fights.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second fight was the one that was at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. And they're all the same fight. It's three times pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, I think the first one was the one everybody really
You hadn't seen it before.
Yeah.
So the first one was breathtaking and unbelievable. And oh my God, how can human beings do this and survive it? And then we saw it two more times. I think the second one was the one that was in Mohegan Sun. I could be wrong. Maybe the first was. But I remember the fight was over. I was gathering my materials to get up and walk out. Said goodbye to the expert commentator and the analyst, whoever they were. We were moving around at that time. Foreman never called one of those fights, so it was either, Emanuel. Oh my God, over and over. Oh my God, over and over.
I remember in the first fight, he must have forgot he was on camera. On the mic, and he was like, "Go to the body." He was getting involved into the fight. He was giving instructions.
So I walked out in the hallway and ran into Pat Lynch, Arturo Gaddy's manager, and they were very close with each other. And in the hallway outside of the arena at the Mohegan Sun, Pat Lynch was crying, crocodile tears, crying. And I said, "Pat, why are you so upset?" He said, "I can't believe we'd lost. I can't believe the judges took it away from us. I can't believe we lost the fight." And I said, "Pat, if we took every one of those 7, 8, 9,000 people who were in the arena tonight and brought them back from here a year from now, and asked all of them who won, how many of them do you think would correctly remember what the judge's decision was and who won the fight?" They wouldn't. I promise you. That isn't what matters. What matters is the majesty, if you want to call it, the unspeakable brutality, if you want to call it, the unreality, the courage of what they saw. That's what matters. And who won, who lost, that's trivial in a fight like this. I felt the same way about Barrera Morales, all three fights. Felt the same way about Bo Holyfield, the first fight. What does it matter who won? I remember at the end of Bo Holyfield, I looked across the ring. Magic Johnson was right in front of me. So that's the distance across the ring from me to Magic. And we catch each other's eyes. And he held his head back and rolled it back and forth as though he was experiencing Stevie Wonder blindisms. And it was a perfect way of saying, oh my gosh, can you believe what we just saw? So, those are the fights that you keep in your mind forever because you don't know if you're ever going to see the majesty of that kind of competition again. Do people get hurt from that? Oh, yes, they do. Do fighters know that? Yes, they do. Do they feel sympathy for each other afterward? Yes, but not in the heat of combat. They go at it as hard as they can.
Okay. What's the best fight you ever covered in terms of entertainment value? What do you think is the best fight? You've covered a lot.
Well, you just mentioned pretty much all of them. I can't name just one because Gaddy Ward, Barrera Morales, Bo Holyfield won. They're all in the same package. Okay. I couldn't say which of them was the best fight I ever covered, but generally speaking, those are the best fights I ever covered.
Okay. And would and you couldn't pick best fight ever, regardless if you covered it or not?
Barrera Morales 1 is as good as it gets. I mean,
Okay.
that's as good as it gets. And I defy anybody to judge that fight and say after 12 rounds, yeah, I'm sure Eric won it. You can't be.
I got you. Okay.
Only Barrera and Morales really know who won the first fight. And my answer is neither.
All
you know,
right.
yeah.
All right.
No, neither lost, neither won. They just fought.
I got you. I got you. I want to get you now into some of the current fighters. Who are some of the current fighters you like now? Do you like Bivol, Pacquiao? Excuse me, Canelo. You know, Shakur,
Well, I like Bivol and
Crawford.
Beterbiev both. Okay. And I think they both have magnificent craft, particularly Bivol,
Mhm.
and scary power, particularly Beterbiev.
Yeah.
So they're great. I think Canelo is an all-time great, and he's proven it. And I think that he has a tremendous place in the history of the sport. In fact, I was at the International Boxing Hall of Fame induction ceremony in Canastota last year, and I asked Barrera and Morales, who were both there. By the way, arm in arm, best buddies.
Yeah,
now,
I
of
think they
course.
have a podcast together. or
Exactly
something.
right.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
And I asked them both, I said, what do you think of Canelo? And eventually they talked about it a while, but they both agreed he has a resume that at least can be presented as best Mexican fighter ever. I said, really? Better than Salvador Sanchez, better than Julio Cesar Chavez, better than either one of you two? And they both said he can present the resume. It's in the discussion. Okay.
I see. I don't think he's quite there yet, and but I agree he's in the conversation. Like when you're talking greatest Mexican fighters of all time, his name has to come up. Even if you say no, not him, but that name has to come up. I would agree with that.
That was exactly the point they were making.
Yeah.
He's in the discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
So he's spectacular. I talked about Benavidez, and I know I talked about Beterbiev and Bivol. Back to the letter B. David Benavidez is fantastic to watch.
Okay.
Extremely exciting fighter. Great power. Great ability to put his punches together. I thought the way that he outclassed Morel was very impressive. You're talking about a guy with a Cuban amateur background and acknowledged punching power. And Benavidez, to me, made Morel look like he didn't belong in the same ring with him, particularly the body punching. I love body punchers, and Benavidez is a great body puncher. So he's another one. And you can't have this conversation and leave out Terence Crawford. I helped to curate Terence Crawford's career. I did his coming out party, the moment when Top Rank was looking for an opponent for Leishanola Ledwaba on the undercard of a pay-per-view in Las Vegas, looking for somebody who could be groomed to fight against Ledwaba. And they put him in against Bradis Prescott, South American fighter who had a lot of skill. Prescott was heavy favorite. Nobody had heard of Crawford. And I saw him that day. Tim Bradley was the one who told Top Rank, he had sparred with Crawford, and he said, put Crawford in against Bradis Prescott. I think he can beat him. He was 100% correct. And I had Terence won virtually every round. And we ultimately saw what a thrillingly spirited, cold-blooded competitor he can be, and what a polished boxer he can be. So there are a lot of good fighters in the sport right now. Those are just some of them, but those are the ones whose names are top of mind for me.
I want to ask you about two specific fighters that I want your opinion on. Is the first one I'll start off with is Alexander Usyk.
Maybe the best all-around fighter in the world. And the next one you're going to mention is Naoya Inoue.
Exactly.
Okay? And I went through all of this without mentioning those two, and they may be, if I do a pound-for-pound list, 1 and 2. In either order, by the way.
Yes,
okay?
I would agree.
Could be Inoue first, could be Usyk first, but they're both flawless. They're both fantastic. They're both tremendous fighters.
Yeah, but I want to specifically focus on Usyk. So Usyk was an Olympic gold medalist. He won the World Championship games also in the amateurs. Undisputed at cruiserweight, with the final win being in Russia, him being Ukrainian, winning the undisputed championship there. Gold moves up to heavyweight, beats Joshua in the UK, then fights this giant who last time we spoke, you mentioned, Fury might be the best heavyweight of all time, and then beats him twice, beats Joshua twice, beats Fury twice. What do you think about this guy's legacy and his legendary status?
All-time great. All-time great. I mean, can't be dislodged from that now. You just gave the resume that makes it very clear. And, and I went through all those other fighters without mentioning Usyk and Inoue. Are we in a golden age of boxing?
I've mentioned that before.
And what is from a nation standpoint, what's the boxing capital of the world? Is it the United States? Is it England? Is it Mexico? Or is it Ukraine? Look at the number of great fighters that have come out of Ukraine in recent years. By the way, the guy that Benavidez beat, Alexander Vostok, great fighter. And there are others. So boxing as an international sport continues to thrive, continues to grow, continues to be largely ignored by general media, continues to be dismissed by fans who don't understand enough. And all of those are the reasons why I still love it and always will.
All right. Well, last question, and then I'll let you go.
We have a last question?
Oh, wow. Hey, we could go on all day, But so we know you got the book coming out. It happened. Where can people purchase that? And also, what are you doing now? What are you announcing? You commentating? You got a podcast? Well, what does Jim got going on?
I'm the only person in the universe without a podcast. Okay. All right. So
all right. We can start one. Don't worry about it.
I at the moment when I might have started a podcast, I wrote the book instead. Who knew that if you write a book and it generates a certain amount of interest and sells at a certain pace early on, that now you're going to be called on to really vigorously and strenuously promote the book. So right now my schedule is full for months to come. With book promotion involvements, such as this. Okay. It happened. Where did it come from? It was from my call of George Foreman over Michael Moore. Why did I say it happened? Because 3 or more times in the lead up to that fight, and George was my expert commentator on HBO at the time, I would pull him apart at fighter meetings, at crew meals, at production meetings, at other occasions when we could have a moment alone, and ask him, George, how are you going to beat Moore? He's southpaw, he's a mover, he's 26 years old, he's unbeaten. Holyfield couldn't find him, and Holyfield has much better feet than you. And every time I asked him that question, maybe 3, maybe 4 times, George would say, Jim, you watch. There's going to come a moment late in the fight. He's going to come and stand in front of me and let me knock him out. Now, I would say to any of your listeners, go to YouTube if you haven't seen it. Watch this. Tell me that George did not know what was going to happen. Moore comes and stands in front of him and more or less lets him knock him out. And it's because George did a spectacular job over the course of those 10 rounds of luring Moore into believing that he was totally in control, that he could not be hurt. He let Moore hit him with shots over and over and over. George was relying on his spectacular ability to take a punch and then waiting for the moment when he could rely on his unique ability to deliver a power shot. And he did it. And it's one of the most amazing pieces of ring strategy and ring architecture that we've ever seen. And it could only have come from a genius, George Foreman. It happened.
That's amazing. Will we ever see you commentating again?
May 2.
May 2nd. You're going to be the blow-by-blow
commentator for the 3 fights in Times Square.
Okay.
How far away from this are we now? 48 hours? Yes, less than that.
Yeah.
36 hours.
36 hours.
In 36 hours, I'll be doing blow-by-blow.
I look very much forward not only to the fights, but to hearing your voice again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time, Jim.
All right, Joel. I appreciate it.